Building a plan, constantly assessing the plan, being malleable for when the plan needs to change, but like not trying to lose direction and hope in it. And I can't say that I'm on top of it all the time, but like that has never been my aspiration to be on top of it all the time. My aspiration is to be efficient, and sometimes efficiency does mean that you miss a couple of shots. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hey guys, it's Ariel from the Work and Play podcast. If you're getting any value from this channel, and I mean anything from the tutorials to the podcast to the random videos that you see on this channel, then I just ask that you do one thing. Please subscribe. Subscribe and share this to anyone that you think this resonates with, and drop a comment below so I know what other things that you want to see next. Now let's get back to the episode. So welcome back to another edition of the Work and Play podcast. I'm your host, Ariel, and I have a crazy cool guest, Mr. Jamil Jude, here to share his story with us. Welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to do this. Thank you very much for including me.
Absolutely. And so we have a lot of different compartments that we can kind of get into, but for the guest purposes, as well as just like myself, even me, like getting a really clear idea of what it is that you do, would you like to introduce yourself to the folks?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jamil Jude. I'm the artistic director at True Colors Theater Company here in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been artistic director for just over 2 years now, but I've been in Atlanta serving at True Colors since 2017. As artistic director, my job is really the lead curator. I'm curating both our programmatic content, the plays that we do, the art that we put out there in the public. That's my lead job, but I'm also very much a strategic leader. Along with my managing director, Chandra Stevens Albright, we are the leadership team of the theater, making sure that budgets, strategic planning, the way in which True Colors wants to show up and be a leader in our civic discourse and the leadership of the city of Atlanta, we help put that frame out there. So it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, probably more column A, just because I am the lead artist at the theater, but definitely column B, but that's a leadership model that I share with Chandra.
Okay. And since you've been at True Colors since 2017, how many plays have you been a part of or had your hands on?
Yeah, I mean, now that the pandemic has shortened it, but 4, 8, 12, so maybe about like 12 main stage shows, so like full productions, numerous readings, digital plays now, community conversations. I'm probably around like 60 events or something like that now during my time in the last 4 years, but a lot of that was shortened because of the pandemic, but this has just been another evolution of my career. True Colors, Atlanta is the third city I've lived in as a professional theater maker, having spent time previously in DC at the beginning of my career, and then where you and I intersected during my time in Minneapolis before moving down back to Atlanta.
Okay, got it. So yeah, we met in Minneapolis, so I didn't even realize you had a whole stint. I mean, life existed before I met you. But okay, so now that we kind of have a foundation of like what you do, because I'm actually still a little bit curious about what the difference is from your evolution from 2017 till now, with the hiccup being you had to do like one digital production last year that I remember you posting.
Right.
So what's that transition been like?
So in 2017, I really came down here to shadow and assist Kenny Leon, who was the founding artistic director in the work that he was doing as a company. Kenny was the first ever black male director I saw working, and made an indelible mark on me as a young person. So I kind of backed into theater in college. I was a football player, got hurt, was asked to be in a play. I had some time, was in a play, got bit by the bug, but it was all kind of like student work. I didn't really study it in university. So when I became a professional in it, I still had very like amateur ideas. But here comes Kenny. At that time he had run the Alliance Theater, which is the biggest theater here in the Atlanta Metro. He had founded True Colors Theater Company, a black theater company. He had directed on Broadway, Felicia Rashad, Sean Diddy Combs. He had been working all across the country. I don't know if he had won a Tony by that point, but like this guy was a big time dude. And but he was so down to earth, man. I come to find out that he was from Tallahassee, Florida, which is where I'm from. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh shit, I'm sorry, like, oh stuff. It
You're good.
This is possible, right? Like, what I can do that. Like, it's not impossible because there's a roadmap. So long story short, meeting him at the beginning of my career, and then him eventually coming back and saying like, hey, I think Atlanta might be a really interesting place for you to continue your development, and why don't you do it, assisting me in trying to bring about a newer future for True Colors. So I think he may have had another plan in mind, but I really moved down here just to kind of learn, see what I could take, and then ultimately move on, whether I stayed in Atlanta or whatever, but move on from True Colors. But I would say maybe about 8 months, 9 months, 10 months into my time at True Colors, he came to me and was like, what would you think about running this company? And from the moment I met him and really started to coalesce what I wanted to do in the theater, it was to run a culturally relevant theater company. And like, this is not necessarily intended to be a selling point for True Colors, but I don't think there is any more relevant, culturally relevant theater company in Atlanta than the main black theater company in a majority black city, in the Black Mecca, in the South. I think we hold a really interesting place. So I make no qualms about it. I think I have the best job in the American theater.
That's dope. And I can attest that after seeing the show you did with the musical rendition of Tupac's story,
Holla if you hear me.
That was so good. And I never thought that I would like a musical with the Tupac theme, but it really, really worked. It was absolutely. I'm glad I was able to kind of see your work, firsthand. But let's take it a little bit back. What was your upbringing like? Have you always been a creative?
Yeah, that's funny, man. My mom, tells the story. One, my mom has always been my biggest cheerleader, man. Like, she says that, I could make a mess in the middle of a carpet, and she would tell me I'm the best carpet messer ever. You know what I mean? So, like, she's always been in my support system. But yeah, I would draw. I got really into like shoe design when I was like a jit. Like, so like 7, 8, whenever that was, I was like creating new shoes. And so I guess I've always been creatively minded. But my big thing growing up was sports. Like, it was something that was a challenge for me, but something that made me feel a greater connection to the community that was around me. I was born in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm, West Indian, Centomian. And growing up, my mom had a heavy accent coming from the States. So there was this, acculturation process that you go through as a kind of an outsider, to what is it like to be a Southern black person. And sports was really one of those entry points. I was really smart in school, and oftentimes, especially when you're black, they try to separate you and put you in white spaces when you are gifted or you have some type of academic success. So that further marginalization from the community that looked like me that I wanted to be a part of happened inside school. So sports was always the avenue to be able to rejoin that. Okay. So I don't know that, I was ever really like into plays. I was in the band in middle school and had to make a decision whether to join the band or play football. And at that time in 9th grade, I was like, that's the easy choice. So yeah, artistry has always been inside me, but it probably was never something that I would use to identify myself. If you asked me back then, I was an athlete and I was a scholar, probably in that order.
If you never got hurt, what did you see yourself doing at that time?
Oh, I knew I never was going to be good enough to play in the NFL, right? Like,
okay.
Sports was always a means to an end. I probably didn't realize where it would take me, but I knew that my goal and my dream was never going to get to the NFL. No matter how much I, kept it secret in the back of my head, I knew it was never going to happen. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. I went to school to study Spanish and to minor in like a science. The goal was always that like I would be in sports medicine. I would be an orthopedic surgeon. I would be a sports doctor that kept me around the team.
Okay.
And kept me around sports and still pursuing medicine. And I pursued medicine fairly hard, man. I went to a summer medical program sophomore year of college and was pre-med really up until the end. I ultimately graduated with another language degree and a science degree, English. I majored in English and not Spanish. Ultimately, when I graduated college, even though I was on this arts kick, I still thought, I'll give it 5 years. I can go to a post-bac program. I still will be a doctor. And years later, medicine is the furthest thing from my mind. But maybe one day, maybe this art career will crash and burn, and I'll go back and do medicine again.
I can only imagine how that probably, your education in medicine is I'm sure it's followed you, so I can only imagine how it shows up in your conversations with like creatives and you guys are talking about plays and something comes up from a biology course or something where you're like, well, because of this, I'm pretty sure it still follows you. But what I was going to say is the thought about, see, this is what happens when I'm like really into this story and I hold on to a question. It was, so before we actually started to film, you were talking about your relationship with values. Mm-hmm. And so since 2015, you've been really heavy into your values and kind of recalibrating every year. But when we pick our career in life, sometimes we value stability over passion, or sometimes we value passion or money, right? So you have this making of like drawing, this creative bug, right, that we haven't really tapped into from a play perspective. We have the sports theme, and then you have the orthopedic surgeon, right?
Yeah.
That is, it gets you close enough to sports, but you don't have to necessarily play. So what was your value in terms of money, passion, creativeness? Like how were you making your decisions at that time?
Yeah. Oh man, what were my values? Probably were misaligned, definitely. It's still true. I've said for a long time that I always do things for two reasons. One, to make my friends jealous, and one, to attract the attention of, at that time, and still is, like women. But like now, hey Lauren, I love you, boo. So just a woman, you know what I mean? And like so really, I think it was recognition. It was probably my value, success, achievement. Were probably my values, and like how quickly can I gain something, do it as best as I can, and be proud, stand up and be like, yo, I did it, and now let's go to the next thing. That probably was more of what my values were in my teens and probably through my early 20s. Yeah, maybe even for a little bit longer than that. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. You said so you can brag to your friends and then for attention of the ladies.
Yeah, definitely. Those are the only two. Those are the only two things I cared about for a very long time.
Okay, and so now you've transitioned almost 15 years from then, and now what would you say has now changed, or what would you say you've added in that?
Like I said, I think still like showing out for my friends is important because I have a friend group of like awesome, high achieving people. Mm-hmm. Right? So like the goal is not to like outdo each other, to be like, yo, look what I did, but to be like, yo, like, and here's the bar. Now someone else go jump it, just so I can go have the challenge of trying to go jump it again. Mm-hmm. So I think that still is a high value for me. I've reframed it, in achievement looks like joyful temple work, like, getting my mental right, getting my spirituality, staying on top of my health, right? So like some of the things that we do to challenge each other is like, hey, did you go to the doctor? Mm-hmm. I went to the doctor twice last year, you know what I mean? Like, so it's that type of stuff. So they've reframed the way that competition exists for me and my friends. And then I still think some of it is less about recognition, because I do feel like I think people in my field recognize the contributions that I'm making, that I have made. So maybe it's less about recognition, but still wanting to be of service and of value. One of the ways I've outlined the values, so I hold 3 core values: joyful temple work, quest and contribute. I also say it like seek and share, that I can explain a little bit later. And this last one, artivist action. How do I use my art to inspire social action amongst other people? That's kind of what that what recognition has morphed into, is how am I taking advantage of the skill set that I have to inspire other people to make active change in the society that they live in.
When'd you get so deep?
I don't know. I don't even, maybe I don't recognize it, but like, I love thinking, man. I do love thinking. I'm appreciative of a job that inspires me to do that gives me space to do that.
Yeah.
This is like my 3rd interview or like talk of the day. So, just on a day when I'm able just to spend time talking to other smart humans, bouncing ideas. I think the quote is misattributed to W.E.B. Du Bois, but it says, the art and trade of philosophy is the government of society, So like, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to sit, balance ideas, have our ideas challenged. That idea of iron sharpens iron. I'm thankful that I have a life that provides me the space to be able to do that. And I'm thankful for the time to reflect it, but also just to kick it and, chill and sit in nice, big, sturdy, white chairs and talk to somebody.
No, right. No, honestly, that's the philosophy of Work and Play podcast, because I wholeheartedly love to just be able to like spitball conversations and have these philosophical conversations where we can just be kind of shooting the breeze, eating food, kicking back, eating some popcorn or whatever, and then start solving the world's problems.
Right.
But I'm such an active, driven person. I'm always the type of person that's like, okay, now what are we gonna do with these ideas?
Right.
So in your friend group, now that you've mentioned, iron sharpens iron, and then your value of like wanting to like set the bar for your friends and having these accountability relationships, so to speak. Do you have an outlet where you guys create things together in your friendships?
Yeah, we have been a little bit inconsistent of it, a little pre-pandemic, but mostly during the pandemic, we would have like these monthly check-ins. It's less of an artistic space, but definitely more of like the art and trade of philosophy, right? Of just where we sit and talk and guide one another. My friends are creatives, and some of that like manifests itself in like, let's just have a group chat where we outdo each other with memes, but yeah, I'm thankful for group chats. I'm thankful for late night sessions with a couple of the homies. So where we're able just to talk and but yeah, maybe less artistic spaces. I have found that my artistic collaborations look different now that I'm a leader of a theater company. But that, maybe that's something that we should do more of. Now you got me just thinking of like, what would it look like to lead my guys in more like art exercises? And we do some of that stuff too, though. Like we've held like webinars where someone who's learned something just sits and teaches the others about what's going on. But yeah, I'm kind of digging now, like what would an art session look like?
And when I say create, it's like not necessarily just create in the artistic space, but because you guys might all come from different trains of thought, and you have this consciousness of creativity and bringing like a certain message to the masses, depending on what their vocations are, you guys can come together and create something that's even bigger than you guys individually, something that looks completely different, ideating in a way where you guys take everything that you've learned, maybe something you've read from a book, something that they experience in their work, and then you guys just kind of go off and just create something that's just dope.
That's definitely, I like that a lot.
Something to think about. So you're a leader of a theater now, but before that, you had your hands on your first play. Now, were you on the stage, or were you always in the back?
So the first time I remember like being actively involved in a play was freshman year of college, and I was an actor.
Okay.
Not a very good actor, but a dedicated one. Um, and from that moment, then I was challenged by other teammates who happened to be in the arts to write a play. The student group that we were part of was called Urban Theater, and we went to a predominantly white institution that was run by like Eastern Europeans. Um, and the theater that they liked to produce was not necessarily theater that spoke to the black and brown students at the university. So we had our own student group, Urban Theater. And one of my teammates, good friend Raymond Taft, like he said, like if you don't write a play for Urban Theater this year, we're not gonna have one. So yeah, then I wrote my first play, Dark Brown Eyes, a play in 4 seasons. Man, that was a trip. But yeah.
What was it about?
What was Dark Brown Eyes about? Dark Brown Eyes was about a black man who was in college, so who was like maybe in his senior or junior year now, I can't remember, but it was about the 4 seasons of his senior year or junior year, whatever it was, and the relationships that he had, both with a girlfriend, with his boys, with other people around the university, and how he was navigating that. It really was like in so many of the scenes were the stories of me and my friends, and how do I put them in a narrative that challenges the way black men see themselves and the way we're seen by others. It was a lot of fun, man. It was a lot of fun, and I'm sure if I went back and watched it or read it now, I'd cringe at just some of the things. But we were talking a little bit offline about what does it mean to make true the thoughts in your head or the experiences you have, and some of that is by writing it down. Mm-hmm. And I think Dark Brown Eyes and Playing 4 Seasons, if anything, was a true experience of what I felt like these early 20-something-year-old black men that I knew and lived around, what our experiences were in life.
Mm-hmm. You have a real air about you where if anybody weren't to know you, like as I look at you growing, like on social media and like the web, and just even seeing you on stage when I got to go to the theater, you have this real professional, like super. It could even be like intimidating because you're like you just carry yourself like that. But then you have this other air where it's like real homeboyish and real relatable. So when you tell a story about the black man experience at that time. You seem pretty layered. So what would you say distinguishes you from the black male experience? But then also, what connects you, what ties you to being yourself, even though you carry this very prestigious persona when you're like in the public eye?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I feel like all of it. Like the dynamism of black men is that we can be all of it, right? I love Lauren. My wife gets mad at me all the time because, my mom talks about it too, this idea of like being a chameleon, being able to blend in everywhere. Some of that is you talked about safety and security being some people's values, but some of that, comes from that. I like people to feel safe around me, and I like feeling safe around people. I really love intimate, deep conversations, and this is why this is so dope to do with you here, although we're doing it for other people. But this feels very much like, we were having the same conversation off the camera, right?
Right.
And some of that means that in order to connect to people, you got to tap into different parts of yourself. And sometimes it means that you break out all the polysyllabic words, you know what I mean? And sometimes it means that you just sit back in the cut and you chill and you just talk about whatever, or just talk how naturally you feel. And I don't try to act like I'm not a black kid born in the Virgin Islands, raised in Tallahassee, Florida. Like that's who I am, and all the things that people associate with small town, large town. I guess Tallahassee was a large town, small city, large town. Like I done all that. I done played in the creek. I done, I done walk through woods, cut through backwoods to get to class and stuff like that. All that is part of who I am. So it just depends on the space I am in, which part of that personality needs to be flexed forward, pushed forward at any given time. So I'm just thankful to have had all those experiences and to be able to feel like I can be safe in any room, depending on what aspects of that people want, or people need, or that I want to experience too.
As a black man, I feel like you're probably a great example for a lot of people who don't have a mentor, don't have a father, don't have X, Y, and Z. Do you find yourself giving mentorship, like finding mentorship opportunities where you can give back in a formal setting, or do you take an opportunity to just kind of do that on a regular basis?
Yeah, man. Yeah, both. I probably do it less formally now because of just the time commitments, right? Like I hate not being able to uphold a commitment, you know. But you know, as a member of the greatest fraternity ever, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated,
Shout out.
you know, Guide Right was big. So when I pledged, you know, showing up at Guide Right, Alexandria Fairfax alumni chapter where I was made in DC. We do a Camp Kappa every year, and every year that they invite me to speak to the kids, I'm excited to do that. Done the Big Brothers Big Sisters stuff, and I love those mentorship opportunities. I think what's probably more informal now are that I felt like I didn't get embraced by a black theater when I was a young producer. I found inside black artists a lot of mentorship, but those black artist connections were often found in predominantly white spaces.
Okay.
So they helped me create safe spaces for black and brown artists inside of predominantly white spaces, but I didn't really have that experience of being inside of a black theater and feeling what that love was in a space for us, by us. So when I became an artistic director, my goal was like, okay, I'm gonna be the artistic director that I always wanted. Was like, anybody who wants access to me, here's my email address, here's my number, here's where I'll be. If you don't get me on the email one time, email me again. You know, I'm gonna get to you. It's not that I'm trying to big time you or anything like that. And I'm happy to put time on my calendar for anybody, because I think that I got here because people thought enough of me to pour into me. It would be, man, like a slap in the face to not do the same thing for anybody who saw in me a person that they could get something from.
Yeah. Did you have your dad and mom in your life, or was it just mom?
Yes, I had my dad and my mom in my life, but not in the same house. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
my father was in the military and was doing this thing. So they never got together. I think they probably split like shortly after I was born. He was in Germany. I think when I was born, he was actually living in Germany, stationed in Germany. But he was always a presence in my life. I would spend my winter Christmas break with him. He would come down to Tallahassee often, especially when he was had some leave and things like that. So he's always been an important part of my life, and our relationship has grown exponentially since I've been an adult, especially as I've become a dad myself. He's become a granddad. He's retired, right? Like, so I think we have probably more in-depth and like conversations that aren't just like surface. So he's always in my life from like a, you know, like a surface place. Like I know, like I could call my dad if I had a question or something like that. Tell about my grades. He would get mad if I didn't do well. You know, the stuff like that. But now, like, we can talk about politics, about emotions, energy. You know, how we're dealing with the world. We're both, you know, he got married the year after got married, so we're both husbands now. So we can talk about all that stuff. And my mom, like I said, my mom's always been there. You know, always been the biggest cheerleader. Served in that. She fathered me too. You know, when it was like. The reason why I played football was because she was a big football fan, is a big football fan.
Wow.
So, you know, throwing the ball with her, taking me all to those places, you know, she definitely fathered me and mothered me too, you know, so big shout out to Lynette.
Yeah, yes. Gotta give mama a shout out. That sounds awesome. And you've come into your manhood with like without any type of off balance since like mom was able to give you what you needed from both like a development from a man's perspective as well as I'm wondering if she also gave you that sense of nourishment which also makes you tapped in so much.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, it just being the two of us, like, there's nobody else, to talk to. I had a lot of friends growing up. Definitely friend groups. And as I moved through the world, the friend groups changed, like, from, like, the kids in the apartment complex that when we first moved to the States to when my mom finally was able to get a house, the kids in the neighborhood, they joined the neighborhoods. Now I'm in elementary school. And then when I started playing sports, and that took me on to the other side of town, then it was like, my teammates, my bandmates or whatever. So I've always had like a group of friends and some of the ones I was talking about earlier, like a squad of 6, like we've been together for 20 plus years. So I've had that brotherhood, but I'm also thankful for the community that raised me because I got to see so many different versions of just like black life, man. Like my homeboy Ramal, his parents were married and I got to see them, and Miss Coleman opened up her house to everybody. So the Coleman's house was like the spot. Everybody knew that you can go to the Coleman's if you needed anything. So when my mom was working her second job, I'd be at the Coleman's house till my mom could come pick me up, or the Fishers, Brendan Fisher, my homeboy Fish, but his father, Floyd Fisher, that man worked so hard. And in high school, he gave me a job at the car wash and helped me, in that maturation process too. So like, we washing cars by day, and at the evening we are at a football tailgate for FAMU or FSU, selling chicken and ribs and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or cutting grass early Sunday morning. So it's like all those types of experiences. I felt like gave me more of a dynamic upbringing, in addition to what my mom was providing me, in addition to what my father was providing me again from afar and in those times when I was visiting. So.
That's dope. And now you're a girl dad.
Yeah.
So everything that you've experienced from a boy to a man, I'm sure you can bring some of those to parenthood to raise your daughter. But then, how are you thinking about that strategy and raising her into a woman and a well-balanced woman at that?
Yeah, man. I think a lot of it is just honesty. Kids are extremely honest, like extremely honest. Last night, Journey and we were just having a discussion, and it wasn't going the way she wanted. I think she wanted something at dinner time, and I was just like, nah, I'm not interested in that. Because you're about to go to bed. Like, I think she wanted some water, and she started crying or something like that, and then taking a fork and looking like what she wants to do with the fork. I'm like, hey, let's not do this. Let's not do this. And then she puts it down and starts crying. I'm like, Journey, why are you crying? And so we've been learning some parenting things. So I'm asking so how are you feeling? Like I'm mad, I'm frustrated. I'm like, good. Like, okay, one, I'm glad that as a dad I can ask my kid to authentically represent their feelings. My mom did a really great job, but I don't know that that was something that we were constantly practicing. You know what I mean? We probably got there a little bit later, but whatever. So it's good that I want to be to say Journey, hey, the things that you are feeling are real. Like I want to validate her feelings so that she can't be gaslit. The process of gaslighting doesn't start with me. You know what I mean? And then we kind of expand, and I'm explaining to her the why, right? So I want to be a father that allows my daughter to experience things from somebody else's perspective. Sure, your experience is valid. Feel exactly how you feel, but you need to learn this empathy to understand something from somebody else's perspective. So we try to say and the reason why you can't have water is because, hey, we're still learning how to sleep throughout the night. You know what I mean? And we don't want you to have to wake up or whatever. And then she started crying again. And I was like, Journey, what's wrong? She's like, I don't want to listen better. And I was like, I get it. thank you for saying like how honestly you feel. And now let's talk about why listening, following directions, instruction, leaning not only to your own wisdom and understanding, but gaining it from people who have more experience, life
Yeah.
experience than you is important. So I think those are those kind of elements, man. Like I want to be honest with her. You know, it so happens that inside the group of 6 that I was talking about earlier, 4 of us are fathers, and we have 5 girls. So like all of us are girl dads. So I think there's also something that I think we have a benefit of like, well, what is it that we want to teach our daughters about their relationship to men? Not trying to be misogynist or chauvinistic or anything like that, but there are different ways of operating that don't necessarily have to fall by gender, but there are some biological things that that are real there. So I'm excited to be honest to her about like shit. I want to teach her game. You know what I'm saying? I want to put her on it to know who she is and what she is. Take ownership of how she presents in the world, not apologizing for it. And how do you leverage yourself? How do you leverage the resources that you have to get you, where you want? And I think that's probably the same thing I would have taught a boy, but maybe I really don't know how it would be different. I imagine that it would be, but definitely trying to lean into honesty, transparency, and like frankness about what the world is and what power she has in shaping the world that she wants to be.
Yeah. Since you have gone through different levels of leadership and creativeness and different identities as a man, what's the one thing that you've learned about yourself as a dad or a girl dad?
One thing that I've learned about myself in these different stages, and I mean, like, I was a fool in my early 20s, man. And I think a lot of that just came from not being honest with myself and who I was, what I wanted out of life. And I think as far as like just being able to then communicate that to Journey, being like, man, here's how, and maybe you can't skip steps. Maybe regardless of how sound you are, there's always going to be an early 20s experience. And that's probably just like this rite of passage that you have to have. But whatever her, no pun intended, whatever her journey is going to be, let it not be repeating the mistakes that we made. You know what I'm saying? Like, to her detriment. If it's for her edification, sure. But if there's something that me and Lauren can put her on, that the mistakes that she makes is because we hadn't had that experience at that time, but that ultimately goes and makes her a better person. And that's the thing that I want. But yeah, I guess just to go back and fully answer your question, I think it is. I think it is like, all right, here's what I was doing, feeling at this time in my life, and just being honest about it. That's probably the main thing I can offer back to her.
Yeah, just reflecting and being able to be authentic and vulnerable about, dad's messed up, or dad's had crazy times, or dad has experienced this, and just being able to be, or dad did this with the women, and
There'll probably be a lot of that. There'll probably be a lot of that. Maybe more than her mom would want, but there's definitely gonna be a lot of that. Like, telling your dad lived, man. He lived before
I think
he
it's
came to the
funny.
world.
I learned of course, my mother knew my dad before me, but the stuff that I go through now, my mom was like, "Your dad did what?" so I can see you being able to just challenge yourself to be honest with her.
Right. Yeah, now I don't know, but like I think because I've been honest with myself about a lot of that now, I imagine that it'll be easier to be honest with her about it too. So.
Cool. So you've been dadding during the pandemic, but you've also been leading during the pandemic. And I'm curious to know like what your experience has been leading in a virtual environment, and if you could just hint on that virtual play you had. You were saying like you weren't really fond of like the virtual experience, but you were glad it actually went out for the hitch. So, what was that leading through a pandemic like for you?
Yeah, man. Oof. Still feeling it. Still feeling it. And I think a lot of it have to first acknowledge that, like, oh, there was a point in time where I was feeling overwhelmed by it all, just trying to make space for everybody, and where I wasn't making enough space for myself because I felt like as a leader, you kind of have to be selfless in that way. But then, being reminded that like you can't lead if your tank is empty. You know what I mean? Because sometimes leadership means siphoning off the gas that you have to pump up somebody else. But if you're empty, you can't do that. It's changed every couple of months. It seems like it changes. The first was like encouraging rest and reflection at the beginning of the pandemic, saying like, how many times are we going to have a world-stopping event? It doesn't make sense to be burnt out in it when the world picks back up and you're starting from a negative place. And then it was like, okay, well, this is now where we are. How do we be productive inside the pandemic? Both from a theater's perspective and also leading my household, being a husband and being a dad. And as we kind of re-enter, it is like all throughout it is uncertainty. So it's hard to lead in uncertainty. There's always some of that, but definitely now when you can't control the elements. But as we re-enter, it's like, all right, what does safety look like? We are vaccinated or what have you, but like, what does our re-entry want to be? And was it healthy, the way in which we moved, not just like on like your breath, but like on like, were we exhausted trying to be at everybody's spots? Were those relationships healthy? So still just trying to execute and evaluate those things too as the reentry. So, and from a True Colors perspective, it's the same type of thing. Like, okay, how were we producing plays? Was that healthy? Oh, we were working 12-hour shifts in a dark theater. Like, is that the best way to make it? Or are there other things that we can do? So I would say where I am right now is in a process of constant evaluation of what's the best path towards a fruitful future. And a lot of that is some prognostication that you have to do. But that's where leadership during the pandemic has me right now. But of course, if you want to go back, if you want to kind of talk through all of the different stages, I'm sure I can pull something of what those things felt like. But yeah.
Well, one of the things that comes up as you've talked about your personal development as well as your leadership development, and helping Journey understand empathy and that kind of stuff. One of the key differentiators for leaders in 2020 was that ability to tap into empathy and encourage self-care and take a prognostic approach to constantly reevaluate what's going on and tend to your level of burnout and things like that. So I can hear the thought process of, okay, let's rise to the occasion. All right, let's check in with ourselves. Okay, let's be realistic. Okay, now how can we, actually be productive in this space so that we're not just kind of twiddling our fingers so that when the world does open, we have something going on. So that makes sense.
Yeah. It is building a plan, constantly assessing the plan, being malleable for when the plan needs to change, but like not trying to lose direction and hope in it. And I can't say that I'm on top of it all the time, but like that has never been my aspiration to be on top of it all the time. My aspiration is to be efficient, and sometimes efficiency does mean that you miss a couple of shots. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now, there are a lot of leaders out there who aren't necessarily tapped in whatsoever. So I'm curious to know, like, what type of things do you do to keep yourself grounded, and what kind of self-care practices do you take part in?
Yeah. First thing, I'll just say, like, how do I stay connected with my team and my staff and try to create, like, a familial atmosphere and, like, I'm sure several leaders be like, oh, it's like a family and like a team. And like, you talk to their staff, be like, yeah, it maybe, but we try to keep it loose as much as we can. We are in the arts. We all are working from home. I like to start our staff meetings off just like with like a random prompt. Like what's your favorite summer activity? Something that we've done a lot is like, what's your favorite like unpopular opinion? So things like that are really nice, and I think that's helped reduce the anxiety. Also, just reminding people that like, man, what is a deadline, right? Like, it's a. I have a friend, colleague in the theater. Her name's Rihanna Yazi. She's from Minnesota, a native playwright. She told us a story that she has in her culture that like about like deadlines and time, and time is not real, but you have to get the family across the river before it unfreezes, right? So this idea of like artificial deadlines don't necessarily serve us, but there are real things. Like at some point, this river will thaw out, and like you can't get caught on it. Right? So just trying to bring that ethos to the work that we do. Like, okay, y'all, like we have grant deadlines, we have funders, we have things. Can we ask for forgiveness? How can we move things that we aren't overburdening ourselves and burning out on this one project? Because we got 12 projects. So what happens if we move one project due date back? Does that give us more time to then focus on the other ones or whatever? So that's that self-care containment. On the personal side, for me, it's about owning the top of the day. When I'm able to wake up and the first alarm goes off, I believe like at 5:02 or something like that. I'm weird, and my alarms are like 2s and 3s and 6s and 7s or something like that. Just whatever, because I'm a weird Virgo sometimes. But when I'm able to wake up at the top of the day and I start with drinking some tea, taking my fish oil pills because I'm a West Indian and we believe in cod liver oil. Taking like a drink that both helps with my protein intake and my cholesterol. I got family high cholesterol. Like, okay, so that for me that means I'm taking care of my mental health. I'm taking care of my physical health. I spend 30 minutes reading a book. 15 minutes reading a book, 15 minutes writing in a journal.
Okay.
Then I'm like, working out, yoga, stretching, some combination of that. And if I can get, as many of those things done by 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock check-in, which is normally when my daughter starts to stir and get up, I know the day is going to be all right. Like whatever comes during the day, I know that I at least took care of myself, that I at least took that medication, that I at least stretched and moved my body, that I at least tried to build it up. I call it my joyful temple work. That's the value. I at least tried to do that before I pour into other people and share whatever I have to give that day. I've really, self-care looks like taking care of that. And then things that I do in the evening, working out at the evening if I didn't get a full one in the day. I've been fairly diligent about studying Spanish. This has been a love affair I've had with the language since middle school. But keeping that going means that I'm doing well. And and spending time with my wife, man, is really big on the self-care thing. Like parenting in general, parenting in a pandemic with a 3-year-old who's constantly at the house can make any relationship start to stress. Yeah. Because it's like, yo, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. Whenever we're able just to connect, man, it brings a calm and the ease to the house, and that's part of that self-care too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we met in Minneapolis, and we know everything that's going on out there in Minneapolis right now with just bringing police and other people in power, white people in power, to accountability, right? And I want to say you told me that your wife, Lauren, gave you a journal, and I'm curious to know like how your reflections, they've clearly helped you think more holistically as a man, but how your reflections have helped you release some of that tension or anxiety or even anger through the pandemic, which I'm talking about, like George Floyd and all of the things that have transpired in 2020.
Yeah, I don't know that I've gotten it all out yet. Like it comes out in spurts. I would say for the longest, especially living in Minnesota, like I had to be quiet about the grief I was feeling. I made myself quiet about the grief I was feeling. And like turned off, like I wasn't watching the videos. I still don't watch the videos, like I still try to move around that stuff because it can paralyze my forward action in a way that I don't find helpful. I do remember specifically, man, early in my time in Minnesota, I was supporting a queer theater company, and they happened to be having an event. Mostly it was white theater makers, predominantly white, and Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. The verdict came down the first time, so I don't remember exactly what year this was, but it shocked me. Like it rocked my world. I'm from Florida, so this black kid in Florida doing what I've always done, cutting through neighborhoods, moving through space, stopping at a corner store, getting something to eat on your way home, Skittles, Arizona iced tea. I love Skittles, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I was like, yo, like that was me 7 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was, however old I was at the time. And I remember telling everybody, like, yo, like, they just acquitted him. For me, my world had stopped. Nothing was the same, right? The sky was now green. And everybody was like, oh, immediately back to doing whatever they were doing. And I was like, yo, I'm alone here in this thing. Like, here I am trying to figure out what it means to be an ally to an LGBTQ community. And this is not to, poke holes or persecute them. But just like in that moment of saying like, okay, as a black man in Minnesota, in this individual instance, I feel alone in my grief. Where are the spaces that I can share that? That's why I'm so thankful for the friends that we have in common, like, Mikhail, Derek, Darius, and amongst others. Because I could then, like, especially them boys being from the South, like, we could have some conversations and we could kind of relate to some things. I found myself on a podcast that I do for True Colors. It happened to be a solo podcast, so at the end of a guest where I kind of wrap things up, and I started crying because I hadn't really said out loud all of the things that it felt like, so I think that type of like grieving process happens intermittently, very sparingly, because one, I don't find it as helpful, but also like I do also feel like I know what it is. I've addressed that stuff. I mean, it makes you sad. Like, I mean, and that there is more that can be done. And I think that's what then drives the art of this action. It's like, all right, you don't have to feel like you are powerless. You have agency, and my agency is art in an art platform. So let me use that then to inspire social action. So.
Yeah. And I don't remember going to any racially aware like plays in Minneapolis, but I definitely think the musical rendition that I went to was a nice combination of art and like black awareness, this black culture.
Right.
So like as the artistic director, like what are some of the things that you plan to come out with that either further the Black Power agenda? And I'm being real radical when I say that, right?
I'm with it.
Right. Or just kind of educate us about what kind of things are going on.
Yeah, so right now, True Colors in what we call our season of joy and pain. And it's ironic because I named this season back in October of 2019. And little did I know in a couple of months, like we would really be experiencing the full breadth of joy and pain throughout the course of this pandemic. And for us, that means like those emotions are inextricably linked in Black people's lives. Like we can't have a moment of joy that doesn't also hold elements of pain inside of it. Like we have comedy and we find ways to move through it. But like those things are real, right? You could just be hanging out, like Tatiana Jefferson playing video games and shot and killed in her house, right? Like so these things happen all the time, but like they're also highly theatrical, man. Like when you think about tragedies and comedies and things like that, the laughing and crying theater mass that people see, like that's essentially theater, and we know theater having its roots in the motherland in Africa. Like it has been part of the experience of Black people to navigate those emotions. So that's a thing that we're talking about right now, about just the truth of that. You know, we talk about having respect for Black lives, and our values are boldness, laughter, abundance, and respect, and how all those things show up in authenticity of Black stories. As we come back, we're really going to be looking forward to what we're calling our Sankofa seasons. So, for those who are unfamiliar, but Sankofa, the Adinkra symbol with this idea of a journey forward, begins with a glance back. As True Colors nears its 20th anniversary, which is 2022, 2023, we want to start with this idea of like, let's go back and get stories, Black stories from the 20th century that we need to make sure that we bring forward. In our 20th anniversary season, we want to reclaim ours. What are narratives? What are communities? What are people, Black people, that we have forgotten about, that we want to make sure that we bring in with us because we need them for our journey forward? And then in our 21st century, as we look forward to what's there, like, all right, what is the future of Black life? Like, what do we want it to be, and how can we play a part in that storytelling? I'm really interested in inviting our community, both locally here in Atlanta, but also nationally, internationally, as a Black diaspora, to investigate what are the things that we need to know about our most recent history, the 20th century, that we got to know, because that affects how we operate here. We gotta understand what the Great Migration did. We gotta understand how that then affected housing policies, that then segregated our communities, that then affected the way that voting plays out, that then affects how laws are governed, and then how police officers who are then sworn to uphold those laws police our communities, causing mass incarceration, dismantle. Like all of it is all connected. We got to understand the root source so that we can then be part of dismantling the system. And again, I hope to be able to do that artfully, in a way that doesn't turn people off, but gets people to lean in.
I guess so. I think that is so. I got so like engulfed in what you were saying. I'm like, man, you got like, for you to be able to be in this position, that means you now get to paint the picture of what that looks like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And these seeds that we plant, from an artistic perspective, gives us the vision of what we need to be like, aware of, paying homage to our ancestors, as well as envisioning where we want to go. So I think that's just like very powerful, and it's really awesome that you have that as a core mission, to be able to bring that to your art and to your plays and to the community's awareness.
Yeah, I think it's important that we envision Black futures too. Like I'm a big fan of Black history, and I'm learning more about Black theater history, just Black history in general, because like unsurprisingly, it really wasn't taught to me in school, especially as I mentioned earlier, kind of being put in these predominantly white spaces because of my level of education. Like they weren't enriching me with that history, right? Going to predominantly white institution, that wasn't really taught to me in that same kind of way. So I've had to go and do some of that as an adult. But Black futures are equally important, right? Like I'm interested in Black futurism, but I'm also just interested in like what is it that we gonna do, and like let's believe that we have a tomorrow, because that is gonna change the way we live today.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%.
And I don't know that I was always interested in like a future. For a very long time in my life, I didn't imagine being 30. Like I just never had a concept of it, and even now, like I struggle a little bit of like, okay, what is my life gonna be like at 45? Like I don't know. Like I maybe got the next 5 years planned out or something like, or at least thinking about it. But like, you know, of course, being married, having a daughter, like those things make me think more about the horizons. And if I can encourage more people to think about that, like, how does that then change your day-to-day actions? That's not to say that, like, you know, you're not going to pursue fulfillment of that day, but you know, maybe you'll save a little bit more money because you want to make a future investment, or maybe you will decide to go to the doctor because you know you do want to live a little bit longer, and you need your body, you need your core, you gotta be present for the future that you
Yeah.
want to see.
Absolutely. So I do ask my guests to go out like 3 to 5 years and talk about what they see for the future. I'm gonna do something different for this conversation. But so one thing that we haven't touched on, but is important to just put a pin in, is your mentor relationship with Mr. Kinney.
Yes.
And I wasn't quite sure if it was he noticed you and pulled, kind of brung you under his wings, or if you noticed him. And maybe it's worth touching on that a little bit. But the question that I have for you is, if we're not going to think in terms of years ahead, in terms of where you want to go, even right now, who is someone, or not even like give it a name, but who would be someone to help you to, look forward or pull you forward to get you where you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kenny's a great name for that because of what he's established, man. You know, like I often tell him that I don't think he gets enough flowers, but it's changing right now. When Broadway comes back, they will have more black plays than they've ever had at any point. But over the last decade plus, Kenny is one of maybe 4 black directors who have directed on Broadway. And he's consistently there 1 or 2 shows a year. So as far as taking advantage of the opportunities presented to you, telling authentically black stories, Kenny's done a really great job of that, and that serves as a consistent inspiration of being able to navigate both TV, film, and live theater as a medium in order to tell those stories. Other people that I think that can bring me forward, man. Like as corny as it is, man. Like there's something about Barack Hussein Obama, man. Like that brother did it, man. He was on under such scrutiny, and raising kids who are whatever imperfect, but like they get to be kids. You know what I'm saying? And you get to see like, oh, like dang, like yeah, like, and again, like this is not shade, but like, what does Obama do when his daughter is smoking weed, right? Like on camera, you know what I'm saying? Like that's real. Thanks, Obama, you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
And like, maybe more than likely, my life and our life as a family will never be as public, but in this position, it is a public position, so there will be some of that. So just seeing like how you navigate and handle that. Other real people, like I think a lot about the fathers in my life. I mentioned Ralph Coleman, Floyd Fisher, Mr. Frost, like of my group of friends who grew up with both of their parents. Like that, those are examples too.
Yeah.
Like how do you stay married for that long? How do you raise kids? How do you keep on showing up every day?
Yeah.
Yeah, and other people, man. Like I'm thankful because like it doesn't. Robert Barry Fleming is another artistic director. He loudly proclaims that he is a black queer man in his 50s. But Robert lives with the authenticity that is inspiring too. In his leadership, he doesn't take any ish from anybody, although he has to swim through it and what he deals with, and he just arrives at some place. And there's black women there too, and I don't remember if your question was about black male leadership, black male mentorship or not, but I get inspired by so many different types of people for specific ways in which they navigate. So I stay open to mentorship, constant mentorship, even if people don't recognize it. You know what I mean? Like the level in which you've produced your podcast is inspiring. So I definitely would take something back here for this, like, box lighting, ring lights, a nice backdrop and setting. This is good, man. This is good stuff, and there's definitely something to be said about the value of intimate conversation, moving towards a point, and how can that be valuable to somebody else?
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I think what you just embodied or personified is just the value of having mentors and coaches that you might not even know, and always looking to different people to exemplify what it is that you want to embody as an adult, as a man, as a father, as a whatever leader, right? And you also gave a mix of people you didn't know, right? Or possibly will know. I mean, you know what I mean? Who doesn't want to meet Barack Obama? But also your friends and the qualities that they have to exemplify what type of man you want to be as you grow up. So I appreciate you. And then also, I just appreciate that tidbit, because I knew you coming here, you were going to be like, how lighting is supposed to be, how sound is going to be. I'm like, okay, I just envision, I don't know. But anyway, so thank you so much for telling your story.
No, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. One of the things that I like to do on the podcast is think about someone along your journey. When you look back, if there's a young man who at any point, whether it was when you moved to Tallahassee, when you transitioned from DC to Minneapolis, or transitioning into fatherhood, if you can pinpoint one of those times in your life and reach back to that person, what would you say, or who would it be? And then what would you say to that person to help them get to their future self?
Get to their future self. I got a homeboy who I play ball with, was my roommate, and he just shared with me recently about like a transformation that he's undergoing in his relationship with Christ, and how that has kind of just like changed up how he operates as a father and as a husband and things like that. And it was really inspiring. It came at a perfect time, especially at a time for me where I mentioned I recognized that I was having trouble dealing with all of the challenges that I was facing. And I too have been in this space where I grew up in the church, but I've had this lifelong battle of like, okay, what is the doctrine? What am I actually being taught versus like, what do I believe, and all this other good stuff. So just hearing him talk about it and his experience, it was so edifying for me. But I'd love to go back and just say to him, like, you are going to arrive at a place that is going to inspire me and inspire other people around you. You've been inspired by other people who are in our network. That's something that he shared with me too. And to be able to give that back to him, I think would mean a lot. I don't know how much he would appreciate it. We both were some pretty big knuckleheads at the time, but it is amazing as I track his journey from where he was to where he is now. I think going back and be able to tell him what he'll become, I think he'd be pretty impressed with himself. Not surprised, but impressed with himself.
Dope. That is exciting. Thank you so much, Jamil.
Thanks, man. This is good. This is really good, y'all.
Absolutely. So if you enjoyed or tapped into or anything resonated with you, you probably want to connect with Jamil, right? So, Jamil, how can the folks get in contact with you?
Yeah, on Instagram, I'm Mr. JD Jude. True Colors is at True Colors Theater. We spell theater with the R-E, so Theatre. True Colors, TRUE. That's all the stuff on Instagram. My website is jamiljude.com. All my contact information is on there. Readily accessible, and again, like if you reach out in the email and I don't hit you back immediately, it's not because I was ignoring you. It may have just slipped down in the flood of inbox, but hit me up again. Try different mediums, man. Like, I love connecting with people, so I try to be as open as possible as I can be with that.
There you have it. Jamil, did you know that I am currently a career coach?
I did know that.
So the cool thing about being a career coach is being able to have these authentic conversations and also trace the steps that we've gotten to, because we don't always trace those steps and figure out how did they get us to where we are today, and then tap into our future self to figure out where we want to be. So I love having these conversations as a career coach just because my friends are doing cool things and it helps me figure out what I want to do. I mean, I have a billion mentors now. Oh, man. But it also helps me kind of get enlightened to other things that my clients might actually want to get into, and different nuggets that sound similar. You know, everyone's life is unique, but things that sound similar, I'm able to trace that back to a passion or interest that you had when you were 6 and you're just drawing, and all of a sudden you become an artistic director, but there are links. And so that is the passion that I have around having these conversations and being able to bring it back to those career coaching conversations where we're still trying to figure out how do we make our transition, how do we tap into our thoughts and feelings, and how do we empathize with ourselves to figure out what our next move is.
Right.
So thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure y'all appreciate it as well. Until next time, I will be definitely posting this one soon. Y'all have a wonderful day, and peace out.
Thank you.
Thanks.